Well, hey there, and welcome to episode number 38 of Metal Raps. As always, I am Mitch Joel, and I am joined by Talking Metal's Mark Strigl. Mark, how's it going?
Good, Mitch. How you doing?
Great. And, of course, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Yes. Good day. Welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So we were looking at discussing a whole bunch of topics, but there's sort of like two, I guess, news items that came together that I thought would be an interesting conversation. And it's funny, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a really interesting article that was floating around the web about all of our rock icons dying. I mean, it's been a tough 2 years, I think, for a lot of very iconic rock musicians that have passed for sure. But in the past couple of weeks, in particular in the metal genre, hard rock genre, we've had Nikki Sixx taking not really a hiatus, but recuperating from hip replacement surgery, as well as very recently was announced that Night Ranger's drummer and one of the singers in the band, Kelly Keagy, had some sort of heart thing that he's on the mend for, and he's taking a minor hiatus as well. And I sort of realized that it's true. While in the classic rock genre, we have this expectation that a lot of these guys are not going to be around that much longer, I feel like it's now starting to trickle down to our friends from the late 70s, 80s, and maybe trickling into the 90s now. I don't know. I thought I would toss it over to you guys and see what you think. It feels like it's happening more often than not that even our sort of fun in the 80s is now getting pretty tired and old, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we're at that age where, you know, we're losing more people than we're getting in our life, and you know, it's just this is it. And I mean, besides that, you know, because I think when you get to be our age, you know, people in their 40s, you know, a lot of your heroes start leaving you, whether they're, you know, musicians or movie stars or athletes, but the thing I find about this that even makes it more tragic in a way is that we're losing these guys, and there's as far as I can tell, the young kids aren't really replacing them with their, you know, six-string guitar playing heroes, and so it seems like not only is this the beginning of the end, you know, for some of our heroes, but it seems like it could just be the beginning of the end of rock.
Huh. I don't know if I feel that certainly the genre has changed, but I don't know. I feel there's a real vibrancy in rock, in particular in the heavy stuff too. I just
not among young kids. I mean, you know, you have a band like Panic at the Disco, which can bring in. You know, and that's not a metal band, obviously, but I was impressed when I saw them in concert with how many young girls were there cheering them on, but there's far and few between. I mean, I don't see any young bands like, you know, when I remember when I was in high school and the Scorpions came around, they sold out an arena in my hometown 3 nights in a row. You know, it's like there's nothing even close to that happening, as far as I can tell, with rock bands, young, loud rock bands.
Do you feel the same way, Mitch?
Well, I feel that rock has become, or rock is the new jazz, right? I mean, yeah. The jazz age was rocking, and there was all kinds of stuff going on in the 20s and 30s, and now it's just this music that a certain segment of the population like, and I think that's where we are with rock. I don't think rock is going to be a stadium thing, you know, 20 years from now, but it'll always be there. It'll always have its fans. And it is disappointing to see some of these guys, you know, on the last stretch of the runway, or if you want to call it that, or you know. I know that I went to a show last night, Jeff Tate in Ottawa, and everything hurts this morning. And I never had that before. So
now the audience being in the audience being affected.
Now. Well, to be fair, I had to be at the venue at noon, and it ended up at, you know, 1:45, and I got to bed at 4:30. So, I mean, I was there for whatever, like 20 hours or whatever it was. But, yeah, you know, we're all getting to that point where we're going to need more heart surgeries and hip replacements, and you know, we're at that age group. I remember watching my mom and dad, and they were like, oh, my God, you know, Vincent Price died, and oh, my God, Elizabeth Taylor, and oh, my God. And it was like, yeah, who? And now it's like, oh wait, it's it's soon going to be Gene Simmons, and soon it's going to be Ace Frehley, and soon it's going to be, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess we're at that age now where our heroes start. In French, they say to turn off, to éteindre, where we're slowly fading away, and it's like, oh well, we're at that point, the tipping point of.
I think for me, it was more an indication that we are getting older. To me, it seems really obvious you're going to have artists from the 50s, 60s, and 70s now really start moving at a higher click of mortality versus the genre where, again, when you close your eyes and think about the 80s, it doesn't feel necessarily that long ago, but to sort of start seeing these things like hip replacements and heart issues and stuff. Yeah, it feels like, well, now the 80s is really encroaching on us. But, the other side of it is, I think there's another side to it too, which has been validated in the past couple of days. I mean, I know, Mitch, you were at the Def Leppard Poison Tesla show in Montreal. It's a tour that's been ongoing. And if you watch the clips, the other side of it too, that I don't know how you guys feel about this, is I feel like a lot of these bands that are still doing it or doing it again, some of them sound better than ever. I mean, especially on that bill. I know people were a bit sort of here and there on Def Leppard's overall sound, but in terms of Poison and Tesla, I have heard nothing but amazing things. Catching some of the clips on YouTube myself, you close your eyes, you could be back to day one with the energy and excitement. So that's the other side of it too, right, Mitch? Like they feel very fresh when they hit the road suddenly.
Yeah, and that's even more amazing with Poison is because they've been playing the hits for 20 years. So in a sense, the set list is stagnant, and yet just the way they deliver it and the frontman qualities of Bret Michaels. I mean, he could probably sing you the phone book, and you would think it is the greatest thing ever. It was just a fantastic show, and Poison stole the night, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful to Tesla. Tesla are always very good, very competent, and unfortunately, Def Leppard, it just becomes a little bit tepid, a little bit boring on the side. There's a couple of spots in there. They have a song, Man Enough, that goes into Rocket, that goes into. I mean, you just want to take a nap for that 10 minutes, and it's unfortunate. Whereas Bret Michaels, he's running around like he's jacked up on caffeine or something, and it's just great to watch. And those songs, it might be the same 15 songs from the last 20 years, but they're some of the greatest 15 songs you'll ever hear in a concert.
I agree. I mean, he's such a professional. Besides the fact that they sound great, and I know there's a lot of like metalheads who don't like Poison or whatever. Personally, I'm a metalhead, and I've always loved them. And on stage, when you get that guy in a room, Bret Michaels, it's like he's so showbiz. He gets it. He slaps every hand. He points at you. He looks at the people in the audience. He makes them all feel like they're a part of it. And Def Leppard, sometimes I've noticed that their charisma on stage, depending on what night you see them, is sometimes lacking. And I love Def Leppard, so I don't like saying that. But I've seen. But
you're right though, because Def Leppard stares at their instruments.
Yeah, I've seen them numerous times, and sometimes the whole place and the energy on stage is alive and at 100%, and other times it's not quite there. And so I don't know. That's been my personal experience with Def Leppard, and I've seen them 5 times live. So I keep going back to see them. I love them. They're awesome. But yeah,
well, to
Poison,
reinforce
you always deliver.
Yeah, and to reinforce this idea of Bret Michaels as a frontman, and again, you've got CC DeVille and Ricky Rocket and Bobby Dahl that are still really, they sound great as a foursome, but truer words have never been spoken about this guy and his ability to understand that on any given night, somebody paid X amount of dollars, whether it was premium or not premium, to come and see him, and he's not going to let them down.
Right.
And again, I was saying before we started recording that my most recent interaction with the band was actually seeing Bret Michaels do this solo show. I happened to be in Florida. He was playing at a casino. I went in this casino. I mean, it was like basically a barn attached to a casino, and the way it was set up, and I thought, oh, there's no way Bret Michaels could walk into a venue like this and think this, I'm so thrilled to be here. And yet when it came time to perform, he was as if he were playing at the stadium back, once open up and say, totally broke open. I could not believe, same thing. And I thought, good for him, whether he was faking it or authentic or not, he gave every single person in that room what they came for. And that really transcends when you're on a bill with a band like Tesla, which is going to be full on rock, keeping their chops. Jeff Keith on vocals is just a firehouse. And then you have on the other side Def Leppard, which, love them or hate them, not love the set list, stagnant or not, they've been a consistent sort of arena band for long enough with, residencies in Vegas, et cetera.
Right.
That it says something when a band like Poison, which, you're totally right, Mark, they are very stigmatized in the metal community. People either like them and they're okay with it, or they just blah. And so it's an amazing thing to see. Mitch, you were going to say something.
Well, I interviewed Brett years and years ago, and I've interviewed him many times, but the one thing that's always stuck with me is that he one time said, I don't play for the empty seats. I play, if there's two guys in the audience, I play my show for those two guys, not the 16,000 empty seats. And that always resonated with me. It's just that's what he does. It doesn't matter, because we were talking about how some bands were complaining that, there's a lot of empty seats and there's this and that. And he said he doesn't care. He's going to play for the people that show up, not for the people that didn't show up. Whereas some bands, and I don't know if we were talking about Guns N' Roses or Kiss or whatever it was, who are like, and that's the consummate pro that he is. It's, if there's one guy in the audience, well, that guy is getting a rock show, and the heck with the 17,000 that didn't show up. And that's what he did at the Montreal, I was going to say Forum, but the Bell Center in April. He played to the band, to the fans that were there, and he delivered the greatest show they will ever see. And he does that every night. And that's what's amazing.
Very cool.
And there's something about his stage presence that it's, I don't know, like this old school Hollywood vibe about it. Like he's just such a professional and knows how to give it every single night. And there's nights he goes on stage where he's probably in a bad mood, or his cat just died or something, but he still delivers it always.
Yeah, this is a guy who's had his share of issues too, bullets and tour buses and heart problems and all sorts of health stuff, and he's just still get out on the road and go for it. The total pro. Well, we were talking about sort of, I guess, age. We start off with hip replacements and heart arrhythmias and problems, and going to the 80s and shows. Let's talk about also the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I think is awesome.
We're such a happy bunch, aren't we?
Well, look, we're getting old. And this is the type of music that interests us now. It's funny. I would play music for my niece and stuff, like Metallica. And what do you think? She goes, it sounds like classic rock. And you're like, oof, I guess I am getting old, because to me it sounds as fresh and speedy as ever. But let's talk a little bit about
one thing here. What you're missing here on this podcast is the odors. I actually have Ben Gay and stuff on my shoulders and neck. So we're talking about hip replacement, and I'm just sitting in this bath of Ben Gay.
Mark's having a Bavarka to sort of calm himself down before his nightcap.
Yeah. Right. Hello. Welcome to Old Fogey Rock. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
So let's talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I know all three of us were super excited. I mean, I really do think that when a band like Journey gets into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I feel the door opens just a little bit wider for other bands that I feel deserve to be in there. One of them being, for sure, in my estimation, Bon Jovi. Absolutely. We've talked about that before. Also, Yes being inducted, which sounds almost ridiculous that they had not been inducted before. Super tragic that, Chris Squire, the bass player, who unfortunately passed away fairly recently as well, never got to see that. So two things that to me were really significant at this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. One was that Geddy Lee actually played with Yes, which I thought was just perfection in terms of what a great. I like in my brain, I didn't even realize how smart that was until they mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that's actually going to be pretty amazing. Why didn't I think that? Of course, Geddy Lee should play for Chris Squire, so that was great. And the other one being, I guess, on a huge disappointment to me, and Mitch Lafon was, I kept texting him, which is the fact that Steve Perry was there, which was great, but didn't sing, which I was really, really disappointed, and I'd really hoped that he was going to sing.
And there was all these reports that he was going to. I mean, TMZ put out an alert that he was definitely going to perform. And
here's the thing. I had a friend who was at the venue and said that he showed up for rehearsals and sang part of Lights and then disappeared into the night, and then that got the whole ball rolling. And that's, I think, where TMZ, and I mean, I had nothing to do with TMZ, but I think other people got the same reports, and it went like wildfire. And I guess it just, you know, I guarantee it happened, but they couldn't make it to the stage. You know, it's disappointing. You know, very disappointing.
Was you know, they played Lights with him, and maybe it just wasn't happening, and they decided to bail on playing with him. Is that what we think happened?
Well, that's certainly the indication from the people that I know that were in the venue for a sound check that he showed up. Now, I'm not saying he might just have felt uncomfortable himself. It certainly might not be Journey that said, "Hey, this is awful." You know,
so
I don't want to.
So there's two things that are happening here, and again, listen, Mitch, you probably have way more inside information. This story that he did some sort of rehearsal, Lights or whatever, it's pretty isolated. Like, I haven't heard that story creep in. What I have seen is this very extensive interview in Rolling Stone with Neil Schon, who basically summed it up by saying that Steve Perry thought it would be too emotional, and that if you actually look at everything from the speech to everything else, he was sort of like, you know, crying the whole way through, and that was the reason. He was too emotional. But this, you know, Neil Schon, even in that interview, he didn't say, you know, he tried stuff in rehearsal, he was there. He made it pretty clear that it was almost like he hadn't seen him until the actual event. So this whole sound check story, like, not that I don't believe you, Mitch, it's just even Neil Schon sort of played the timeline like they saw him backstage at the event and that was it.
Yeah, listen, I obviously wasn't there, so I can't vet the information, say it was 100% accurate. But usually when I get a report, you know, the people that are reporting or sending me an email or a text aren't jerking me around. They're usually telling me the truth. But you know what? It didn't happen. There's no proof that I can deliver other than
Show us
that.
The proof. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I can't show you the proof. I can't do anything like that. But you know, that said, though, bands will often stitch the narrative to fit their circumstance, and so just because somebody gave an interview to Rolling Stone or to something else, you know, narratives being, you know, accommodated is part of the biz too, right?
I want to be clear. I wasn't sitting there going, oh, because if this happens, there'll be a tour and I'd love to. It has nothing to do with that. I really just believe, to me personally, Steve Perry has one of the best voices in rock and roll. And I happen to be of a certain age in the sort of early 80s where those songs struck a very powerful chord that set me in motion to like a lot of the bands that I like and we talk about all the time here. And
Absolutely.
Because I had seen him recently do that sort of guest appearance with the band The Eels, which you can catch on YouTube, and hearing how great he sounds, there's a part of me that just wants to hear that voice again. I just miss his voice. And he seemed very vocal about the fact that he recognizes that people miss him. But I don't know, like, it just kills me that if I had a voice like that, regardless of, and listen, he's been through a lot. I get it. I just don't know if I could not sing. This guy hasn't sung in so long. It's disappointing to me.
Yeah, me too.
It is, but you know, I interviewed Steve back in 2004 or 2005, and we had gotten into the discussion about why you're not singing, why you're not doing albums, and he said to me very succinctly, well, my parents won't be able to hear it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, my mom passed away and my dad passed away, and he said, whenever I got on stage, I always had this hope that, or this expectation that mom would be in the audience or dad would be in the audience, and so I had to perform my best for them to show up. And now that can't happen anymore, I don't have the motivation to do it. And does he still feel that way 13 or 14 years later? I have no idea, but that's what he had told me then, and it certainly seems to fit the narrative properly. Right?
It's just heartbreaking to hear him still sound that good and not use that voice. That's just, I'm going to sit on that and stick with it. And I don't care if he plays it with Journey or, solo stuff was great too. Just hearing that voice to me was always something. So super depressing. Mark, I want to throw it over to you because there's this interesting development in the band Ghost that I know you and I have a much deeper affinity for than Mitch Lafon does. But what's going on here? They've replaced everybody in the band except for Papa?
Yeah, that's and people... The Ghost fans are really scratching their heads over this. I mean, this is a big moment for Ghost, about to go on tour with Maiden, which will definitely expose them to some new ears. And I'm a big fan of this band. And I mean, there's so much mystery that surrounds it. And it seems now, as much as I liked the mystery, now I'm just really scratching my head over this, because it's being reported, and as far as I know, not truly confirmed, but that every single nameless ghoul in the band, basically every band member except Papa, was fired and has now been replaced. And when you listen to the records, the guitars have a distinct sound. It's more than just the songwriting and Papa's voice that make these songs so great. So I don't know. The whole thing is weird to me, and I'm nervous for the future of Ghost. The other thing that came out of all this is when Ghost generally did interviews, it would be one of the nameless ghouls doing the interviews. Papa rarely did interviews. But now Blabbermouth is also revealing that nameless ghoul was simply the guy who played Papa, but he just didn't want to put all the makeup on, so he just put a mask on and go do interviews playing the part of a different band member. So the whole thing is just so strange and weird to me, and I have to admit I'm a little disappointed if this is actually the case, which it seems as though it is, and I think a lot of other fans of the band are too. And then I think there's a lot of other fans who probably won't notice because they're hidden behind these masks. Yeah. But
look,
well, it is true. Look, they're suing though. They're suing. They're suing in Swedish courts. So you know.
Yeah,
but listen, there's a couple of things. One is, suing, doing this. It's like there is a sort of PR stunt ability here to maybe keep things interesting for the band. They got to keep reinventing themselves. The other thing I thought when I first saw this story is, and we've seen this before, where Ghost is really an individual in the studio, and these are just some sort of buddies he pulls together and needs, and everybody can throw on a mask, and maybe knowing that it's a one-person Ghost band and that the narrative can change at any point. This isn't even as absurd as things got with Kiss, or continues to get with a band like that. That narrative, to me, when I first saw it, I was like, that could totally be true. It could just be one of those scenarios where Ghost is one dude. He writes these great songs. He puts a bunch of people into masks. This way he doesn't have to stress about who's in the band or who's not. There's a lot of stories where we can't be so sure as what's going on here either.
Right. Well, the whole narrative of the band is this fictional story of who they are and who Papa is, and very much like Kiss had these fictional stories about the Starman or the Space Ace or whatever,
and Cheap Trick being from Venezuela.
Right, sure, and so the fake storyline that has been given to us with the first 3 Ghost records was that Papa was replaced on every record with, so it was Papa the first on the first record, then he was fired and they brought in another guy who was essentially the same guy. And then on the third record, the second one was this guy. He was this older guy, and there's videos where he's with him without the makeup, where he's this like 80-year-old dude, not 80, but 60-something-year-old dude. And then he was fired and they brought in another guy. So it's funny that they've had this fictional narrative of Papa simply being replaced on every single record for the most part. And now it appears that the reality is that all the nameless ghouls have been replaced. It's a very strange thing. And I kind of doubt we'll ever hear the real story behind it.
Yeah, I also think that if you think about the name of the band and the games that they're playing, it's sort of turning into a Usual Suspects Kaiser Soze scenario here, where who is Ghost ever? And again, my guess is behind the scenes, this is a one-person project thing, and they're just messing with people there's some narrative going on here. Before we take off for this episode, let's go through some of the stuff that we've been listening to lately. I'll throw it over to you, Mitch. What have you been checking out?
2 things. I'm getting back into Night Ranger with Don't Let Up. I think I mentioned that last time. I'm loving that album. And Honeymoon Suite, Hands Up. I don't know if I mentioned that one the last time, but quite enjoying that, actually.
Nice. Mark, what have you been checking out?
Well, the new Deep Purple is very strong. I really love the Bob Ezrin feel of it. What's
the name of it?
Infinite. And
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, it's very good. I know Ezrin was with them on the last record too, but I almost feel his presence more on this record. It's a great listen, and it seems as though this is going to be the final thing we hear from Purple, and if that's the case, what a way to go out. These guys, with the exception of Steve Morris, who's the youngin' of the band at age 62. Steve Morris, 62. The rest of them are all in their 70s, I believe, at this point. So it's, I think it's just a great effort by them, and it sounds like classic Deep Purple. So what a way to go out for Deep Purple. And I've been really digging that one a lot. KXM, the Scatterbrain record's pretty good too. I've been checking that out.
The thing about Deep Purple, I've mentioned this, I think, many times on this show, is if you just look back at the full history, this is one of the most unique bands, not because of what they did in terms of the classic rock genre, but in the later years. This is a band that accepted their age and wrote rock albums in the age that they were, never trying to be someone else or a different generation or to sound like they came from 10 years before. And I think that legacy of from album to album, literally from the 80s on even, it's staggering when you listen to, because there were some of the albums in the early 2000s that were phenomenal.
Yeah,
just
Abandoned
great
was a
killer.
Great record,
yeah, just great, Ross. So that's why I wrote. I did not know they had a new album. I'm super excited to check that out.
Great. Danko Jones too has a great record. Yeah. Wild Cat, which I'm really digging.
It is very likely. I'm actually doing one of the keynote presentations next week at Canadian Music Week in Toronto. It is very likely I will be seeing them live next Wednesday night. So I will keep you guys posted on that. Two albums that I've been checking out. I'm going to tag team on to what Mitch said, because he sort of brought it to my knowledge that it was out. But The Night Ranger, Don't Let Up. Again, very much speaking into the same narrative that we had earlier with Def Leppard, Poison, and Tesla. A band that is just simply getting better with age. And listen, I was a big fan of their early stuff, no doubt. But they are totally accepting where they are in life. They're having fun, and you just feel it in the music. And I really thought Don't Let Up is a killer album. On the sort of newish, heavier side, I'm also loving Mastodon's latest, Emperor Sand. I was going to point to you, Mark, and say, have you checked that out? No,
I just started listening to it, and very good, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, those are the types of bands. When I see and hear bands like that, I think maybe there is a future and hope for rock and roll, because they're just phenomenal. The third one that I'll mention, and I'll mention with a hesitation, is the new Steel Panther, Lower the Bar. I'm waning on this band. I think both of you guys have waned on them for a while, but there was something original about the way they wrote great music on the first couple of albums, and the lyrics were ridiculous and over the top. I get it, but now it's almost like they're being derivative of themselves versus trying to like recreate that great sound from the 80s and make songs ridiculous. So yeah, it's there. I think it's worth checking out if you like the band, but definitely not my favorite moment for those guys. So
they're parodying themselves. So a parody band is being a parody of a parody band.
It's getting quite derivative. So, but I thought I'd mention them. So,
you know what? I got to say, all the guys in that band, they've done stuff with LA Guns and Rob Halford and all this stuff, and they don't talk about it, which is unfortunate. Just incredibly talented, and the fact that they've latched on to such a horrible vehicle for their talent, it just bothers me. It's over the top, stupid, childish, and they're going to go, that's exactly the point. Yeah, whatever. Ugh.
I think they're. But Mitch, I think that you're missing. That there's a stopgap there where they're doing that because this is how they. This sort of was the only thing that really worked for a lot of them, unfortunately, and it has worked and it's done really well. So.
Yeah, and you know what? When they go out and do their own shows, like they did recently in Montreal at the Metropolis, whatever, God bless them, whatever you want to say, good for them. But when Judas Priest or a band like that legitimizes them and takes them out, honestly, shame on Judas Priest for having taken them out a couple of years ago. That was just an awful, awful pairing, an awful idea. Anyway, I can't stand that band on any level. So,
well, let's end on that positive note, shall we?
Yeah, from rubbing Bent Gay on our back to hating Steel Panther. What an episode.
Yeah. Well, if people want to reach me, they can always find me at Mitch Joel, basically everywhere, Twitter, etc. If you want, you can feel free to check out Groove, which is the No Trouble podcast that I've been doing. Most recent episode is actually with Liam from Dillinger Escape Plan, so you can check out that fun conversation I had. Mark, let people know where they can find you.
TalkingMetal.com is the best place. We have the podcasts up there and other stuff to check out on the site. So, yeah, TalkingMetal.com.
Mitch, what do you got going on?
Yeah, well, I'm always at Mitch Lafon on Twitter, MITCHLFON. And, of course, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon on Podcast One. Just head over to podcast1.com and you can find it there. And also do check out Mark's Talking Metal, because there's just a lot of great rock news on there. There's a lot of great stories. It's not just a podcast. There's all kinds of On This Day and Rock This News and features. It's to me the best rock site going right now, because it caters all over this. It's all over the place in terms of what it caters to, not just. Yeah, and there's no gossip. It's not like a TMZ site like some of the other ones, or it's not clickbait oriented like a lot of the other ones have become. So kudos to Mark for running that site.
Thanks, Mitch.
Nice nepotism. We love the nepotism here. So
we do. I love it.
Yeah, this has been episode number 38 of Metal Raps, and we'll be back real soon with episode number 39.